Dear colleagues, dear organizers, thank you very much for your invitation and possibility to present my project here. Music in the Time of War, a questionnaire study, is only one part of the research project held at the Max Planck Institute for Empirical Aesthetics under the guidance of Director Professor Dr. Melanie Wald-Fuhrmann. This research is devoted to the impact of war on the music listening, music performing, and creation during the time of the Russian-Ukrainian War, with the focus on the full-scale invasion period. Since Russian troops invaded Ukraine, Ukrainians' previous lives have been shattered and they have been placed in a situation of an existential choice, facing loss and death. Under wartime circumstances, music takes on a different meaning for everyone, but very often it helps to cope with hopelessness, despair, and the pain of loss. It helps people to live through their own experiences of war and to preserve without breaking down. So my study under guidance of Melanie Wald-Fuhrmann, examines not only academic music, but music as a part of everyday life. Under the wartime music, we will understand all music created during this period, academic, art music, and non-academic, including pop music and underground. Thus going beyond the scope of considering only especially narrowly genre-specific military music. Our research questions are follows. What are the main functions of music during the war? How does war affect listening to and creating music? How did listening and music making behavior change during the war? And how does war affect music and national identity building processes? And one of the main questions is how do Ukrainians use music to cope and how use music to cope with difficult wartime emotions, and what kind of music activity is most effective for expressing and containing difficult emotions during wartime? How Ukrainians' musical preferences changed during the war? All these questions is possible to have from questionnaire study. And only the question about how could we establish a typology of war music and what new forms and new genres are emerging and how are existing genres being updated and transformed is better to answer with database methods. So the methods of study are the main. They are three. First of all, is developing a questionnaire music in the time of war. Then creation of a database of the most listened to music during the Russian-Ukrainian War, which started 9 years ago, but with a focus on the time full-scale invasion. And classification of the database content, selected musical analysis of contemporary, popular, underground, and academic Ukrainian music. And then interview with Ukrainians from different social groups. Currently, this database and survey is in progress, and now we have only preliminary results. Upon completion of data collection, quantitative and qualitative analysis will be conducted to provide more accurate answers to the most of research questions. Now my speech may be too personal, but no one was spared by the war, I mean Ukrainians. Creating this survey was a kind of yoga practice for mind widening for me, because this questionnaire is designed for scientific purposes, but also it has an additional senses. By answering the questions of the questionnaire, participants have an opportunity to actualize their own emotional state, their own preferences, their own musical tastes. Maybe even get some answers in the process of filling this questionnaire. For example, to the question, who I am, a lover of rock, jazz, or contemporary academic music, in which situation I use the music, it's possible to find answers during the passing this questionnaire. So that more awareness of own identity and understanding the role of the music in the personal everyday life may be possible result of the survey passing. Now, my focus will be on people who write or play music or who listen to music, on their role of music on their everyday life. Because the war is a collective grief, and I have a personal interest to see how others deal with the difficult times with music. And thus, I want to find my own way of combination of way to survive all these times. I'll still searching. It's the question that is underlying research question that runs through the whole research. But now I'm sure that it's possible to overcome all difficult emotions with music. That is why I'm focusing on how people make music during the war, what they like, what kind of music, what new ways they have found to reduce the pain of their experiences, what do they listen to. I was looking forward to answering these questions and search for answers in the new participant questionnaires every day during experiment, which is still continuing. The question of the musical behavior and role of music in times of societal crisis, particularly in COVID times, was already studied in Max Planck Institute by Lauren Fink, Melanie Wald-Fuhrmann a few years ago. And so experience of creating questionnaire was also developed in this work. You can see the link on the screen. Also, I used during questionnaire creating this literature and these sources, and it was very important moment that I used a stimulus scale which was developed also with scientists of Max Planck Institute. It's a scale of emotions, aesthetic emotions, which is used in my questionnaire. The questionnaire developed on both languages in Ukrainian and English, with special Lime service software platform, which allows flexibly create the required design and with all necessary parameters. And as you can see, it has 5 core sections. First of all, common information, including country, gender, age, level of musical education, and music importance for every participant. And a lot of questions about personal situation during the war, including how did the war affect the music and ability personally. It was a free text field with a possibility of free answer for participants, and every day I'm waiting for new answers of extremely interesting methods of overcoming of music with music during the war. Third part was musical preferences and music listening, including war-specific situations such as air raid, sirens, blackout without electricity, periods without electricity, hostilities, and massive attacks, so on. And the fourth part is devoted to musical activity, including whether or not people experience it making music as helping them cope emotionally with the wartime emotions, and favorite forms of making music. And the last part was the questions about aesthetic emotions and what kind of music is the most helpful for surviving during the war. Data collection was a fascinating process because it was mostly via Telegram channels, because Telegram is the most important media in Ukraine. More than 70% of Ukrainians are using Telegram channels. So I shared my link via Telegram channels of refugee chats all over the Europe. I was a experienced spammer every day, and nightmare of Ukrainians during this period, but it was it still continues this process, and it's really interesting. Also comments with in the channel Telegram channels with more than 100,000 subscribers is very effective. Currently, we have near 1,000 participants, but a lot of people withdraw survey, and the full survey is past 332 participants. This quantity is enough to make some conclusions, preliminary conclusions. And the youngest participant is 14 years, and the oldest is 70, and mostly participants are female. And most part of participants are in Ukraine now. And it's very important that most of participants have no musical education. It's people from refugee chats. But I also included my students in Glière Music Academy. They participated in the survey. So in common, 34% are musically active. Some results. We used to ask participants about their current emotional state, and to compare them their emotional state now during the war and before the war. So we got such a picture of decreasing of overall health and well-being with a scale range from 1 to 7. 1 is much worse and 7 is much better. And we can see that mean is 3. That it shows that overall well-being became worse, and it shows that negative emotions increases since the war started, but not necessarily decrease in positive emotions, except for joy and happiness. The increase in the level of negative and difficult emotions and this make necessary the use of various methods to cope these emotions. And the different types of musical activity can help with this. Emotional coping of traumatic experience plays a significant role in the processes of music making and music consumption during the wartime. And so we have resulted mostly 67%, near 67% of Ukrainians are using music to cope with negative emotions. And so we can see the changes in engagement and in different activities. From this scheme, you can see that music listening is and growth in social media are increased from the war beginning. They are increased the most, and these changes in musical activity positively correlated with importance of music and degree of musical education. The statistic of survey music at the time, its War Time Questionnaire, showed that musical preferences of Ukrainians were significantly changed. The answers on the question how Ukrainians' preferences after the war beginning have changed shows that the percentage of people who have abandoned Russian music has increased significantly, and now Ukrainians are listening to music by Ukrainian composers and performers Ukrainian bands much more. This is a different results from different sources. From professional line survey, yes, we use yes, musical preferences has changed. Is more than 50%, and the Telegram channel with another auditory shows the another results with 66% of changing of musical preferences. This auditory has significantly less people with musical educations. This parameter is important for this. Let's be back to the data from professional line survey software. So what were the changes in the musical preferences? Mostly Ukrainians listen to less nostalgic music and more patriotic music. A lot of patriotic music is necessary for Ukrainians now. And many of them in the free text fields shows that they are abandoned Russian music, and they began to listen to Ukrainian composers, art music, and popular Ukrainian bands and performance much more. And now my study is not finished, and I have few hypotheses about possible reasons for changing musical preferences. I suppose that it's a process of national identity forming, and at second, the Russian culture canceling, because Russian content is directly linked to paying taxes on the viewing, which are then used to finance the military aggression against Ukraine. And possibly values change and test changes too. Forming of identity is closely connected with values. And the next reason is that music can remind of a loss that has not yet been healed. As one of the participants said, all the music had to be changed because any pre-war songs remind us of home and friends and lives that no longer exists, and it hurts a lot. So all the music was changed. War generates violence, which is countered by songs of despair and hope. And trauma of violence is connected with the absence of identity and personal borders, or difficulties with identity and borders. So aggressor is always against of personal existence, with no borders for cruelty, without any respect. Overcoming the trauma of war, as well as psychological trauma, is possible, among other things, through expressing what cannot be expressed in words through music. And overcoming trauma is also possible through the realization and affirmation of one's identity. Answering the question, who am I, is extremely important in the struggle for peace and for the healing process of war trauma. So for Ukrainians, national building processes became much more important after the Russian invasion, and now national identity is very similar to social and cultural identity. We now creating our national identity because of war, because we need to cope with stress, search for cooperation, and work for the victory. So music is a soul, soul of culture, as Vida Adler said. So people need a way to cope with the negative emotions during the war, and 67% of participants use music to cope with how the war affects them. Answering, here's a scheme when you can see what kind of musical activity is the most helpful for Ukrainians. It's musical listening is more helpful. So Ukrainians share their playlists in which there are a lot of this playlist includes wide repertoire from Gregorian chants to music by Maxim Shaligin, from Ukrainian folk songs to parody songs by blogger Wald-Fuhrmann. Music of Igor Zavgorodny and Andriy Merkin is represented in playlist with Tuchynska and Schoenberg. So music listening has the most coping potential. And here is the expressions of participants about the most impact of musical ability, how war affects their musical ability, and most of them say that during first 6 months it was difficult to listen to music and create it. But there are other ways of music which were found by Ukrainians, such as singing lullabies for kids, songwriting, and the most important moment that when somebody is singing, he no longer feel the fear. I will make a small conclusions. That the main impact of war in musical activity has specific features. Negative and difficult emotions were increased since the war began, and living situation of the most Ukrainians was changed. Ukrainians cope negative emotions via musical listening and singing among the different kinds of musical activity. Music listening and browsing social media have increased the most. And music is a way to cope with stress and to reduce it through parodies, covers, and is a way of difficult emotions containment. And the musical preferences of Ukrainians were significantly changed. Ukrainians have been rejecting Russian music and changed their preferences towards Ukrainian national music. Music becomes a way of resistance and a tool for forming national identity. And music becomes also as an aesthetic, a doctor, a means of spiritual growth and entertainment and motivation. And the main meaning of music during the time of war is giving hope for victory and peace. Thank you very much.